1st, 2017. And we're going to start off by having the members introduce themselves. Starting on my far left.
David White, alternate.
Peter Howe, alternate.
Terry Parker, commissioner.
John Swords, Vice Chairman.
On my far right.
Ray Rogozinski, City Engineer.
Robert Flanagan, City Planner.
John Posey, Commissioner.
Marie Chaffee, Commissioner.
Bill Beeks, Chairman. And the voting members will be Commissioner Parker, Commissioner Soares, Commissioner Posey, Commissioner Chassie, and myself. First item.
First item is the Route 6 corridor study. May 31st, 17, Route 6 corridor study final draft report, commission review and discussion with Fitzgerald and Howard.
Mr. Flanagan.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Robert Flanagan, City Planner for the record. Wanted to have this meeting to accept the final draft report of the study from Fitzgerald and Halliday. You may recall that we started this process last year around this time, and Fitzgerald and Halliday has been working with us very diligently to prepare this final report. I will say over the last month or month and a half or so, we've been working not feverishly, but we've been working very diligently to polish up the report and get it for presentation to you this evening. And before I introduce Carol Gould from Fitzgerald and Halliday and her counterpart, I wanted to just say that what I envision for tonight as staff, and certainly I will take my direction from the board, is that there is an acceptance of the report this evening, of both the report and the implementation of the program. And then at some point in the fall, and then again over the summer, we will continue to compile comments and work on the plan with the chair and the vice chair, and then in the early part of the fall have a public hearing on adoption of the plan into the plan of conservation and development. So there will be a public hearing in the fall. So this is not the last time you will see this, but that public hearing would then totally wrap up the process. And Commissioner Chassie will not be here with us, unfortunately.
I'll give you my number anyway.
So with that, Mr. Chairman, if you wanted to recognize Carol Gould from Fitzgerald and Halliday, and if she wants to introduce her counterpart, and I've just met him and I already forgot his name.
Thank you. As Bob said, this is the purpose of this meeting is to go over the final draft of the plan. And before I went any further, I just wanted to let you know I have with me this evening Mike Morehouse, who's with FHI. Francisco could be here this evening. Mike is a professional engineer and a transportation planner. And he brings a wealth of experience with him this evening, so he'll be able to respond to any questions you have, particularly on the transportation elements of the plan. What's on our agenda this evening is to give you kind of a quick update on the study. What I'm hoping to accomplish this evening with this overview of the draft final plan is to make sure everybody's on the same page and that we, everybody has all the information that they need. I'm not going to go through the plan page by page or recommendation by recommendation. I'm going to try and hit the highlights, and then we'll see if you have any questions. But as we've been going through this process with all of you, I think that we are at the point where we have the plan pretty much in place, and I'm anticipating, hopefully, that there are any major shifts in direction on the plan at this point in time. The thing that is new to all of you this evening is the implementation plan, and I will spend a little bit of time on that and then talk about, as Bob said, what the next steps are. So this is an overview of the process that we've gone through with all of you over the last year, almost year and a half. Throughout this process, we've invited public comment, and we've had a number of opportunities for public outreach or input into the process. So what we've heard from the public has informed this entire process, as well as the input that we've gotten from all of you. We started with an understanding of what the issues are and the opportunities in the Route 6 corridor, and then from the public input and your guidance, we came up with a vision statement for the corridor, and that's kind of the guiding view of what the corridor should be like long term. We accompanied that with some guiding policies, and that will help guide the implementation, in particular, any adjustments that you make to zoning, that will give you a framework for that. From that, we came up with two components, if you will, to the plan. We have a series of land use typologies. That's a broad land use framework for different segments of the corridor. And then we also have a number of transportation strategies, what can be done to address the issues relative to transportation in the corridor. From this, we've got a list of recommendations. We also came up with a specific concept plan for the downtown gateway area, which we'll get another quick look at this evening, which gives you a guide so that when development applications come in for this area of Bristol, it'll kind of give you something to look to say this is kind of what we want to see in this area in the future. And then from that, we now have the corridor plan with the implementation program. So this is where we are right now. We did have a working meeting with a working group on April 25th to give some individuals from different commissions and the town staff a chance to go through the plan page by page and give us their input. So that did inform the work that we've done over the past month in coming up with some other elements and amendments to what we've already done. Our overall approach to this study has been to look at this corridor in three distinct segments and with three very different characters to them. And I just bring this back up to also let you know that this is the way that we framed the recommendations and the implementation plan for the Route 6 corridor. So we've looked at it as a corridor-wide things that you might want to try to accomplish, and also things for each segment of the corridor. So this is what the content of the plan is. I think you've all had a chance to see the draft. As you can see, it's still marked as a working draft. So we will be doing some formalizing the formatting and so forth with it after your meeting this evening. But the contents, we have a review of all the information we collected that resulted in our understanding of the issues and opportunities. And we have the other elements that I just walked you through, the vision and guiding principles, the land use scenario with the concept plan for the downtown gateway area, transportation strategies and recommendations, and the implementation plan we decided to do as a standalone document. So there is an introduction to it in the main body of the plan, and then there is another standalone short report that you have hopefully had an opportunity to look through. So this is just to review what we drafted as the vision statement and that you all had some consensus on for the corridor. And not to read the entire thing, but to call out a few salient elements of it. The Route 6 in Bristol will continue to serve its role in the community as a significant commercial corridor. What this plan does is not propose any kind of wholesale or very significant change to the corridor as it stands today, but we're looking for opportunities to enhance what's there and to really build on what's there. So it will be a destination. We want each segment of the corridor to have an identity and to have a destination sense of place to it. So most development will result not from new development that expands the corridor and makes it wider, but from infill and adaptive reuse of existing properties to make the best use of the properties that already exist out there and to improve on the ones that are already out there. And then I'm just going to go through the three distinct segments of the corridor and what the vision was for each of those. So the Terryville Avenue segment will continue to be a rural neighborhood. We envision it staying pretty much as is, and the plan is intended to reinforce that. The Downtown Gateway segment will continue to be a vibrant entry point to Bristol's downtown, and the plan emphasizes against strengthening that, building up the character of it, linking it more strongly with the downtown. So it really is an inviting welcome into the downtown area. And then the Farmington Avenue segment will continue to have its own distinctive identity. And the goal is to have it known even more strongly throughout the region as a destination for shopping and commercial purposes and a place to go that you could spend the day doing so. And then relative to transportation, we said that in the future, the Route 6 corridor will provide a balance between local needs for travel, the needs of people moving through the community and coming in to shop, and it will efficiently and safely connect the corridor with the balance of the community as well as adjoining towns. So, and it will also offer opportunities to travel by a variety of modes, so not just by automobile, but by walking and bicycling. This is a quick review of the land use typologies that we've developed for the corridor. And as I said, the land use typologies are really a framework for how you want to see development occur over time and evolve over time in each one of these segments. And it's a basis from which you can consider individual zoning amendments or zoning changes. So it's not a zoning prescription, it's a framework for them. Every one of these categories we envision as finding an opportunity for some mix of uses. So although the Terryville Avenue segment is predominantly residential, we can see that as being a mix of types of residential or opportunities for people to live and work in the same structure and same home. And it's a kind of a recurring theme, I think, for the recommendations that we've made for the corridor, is to build some more flexibility so that as the market changes and as market forces changes, which they will, is a long-term plan, that this will be able to move along with it and still serve your needs and your goals for the corridor. So the Terryville Avenue segment will be predominantly residential, but we're clustering the neighborhood mixed-use, more commercial uses in two distinct locations. And then this spot on the eastern end of this segment is where it transitions into the downtown. And we recommended a transition zone in that area to create a nice buffer between the really residential areas and the more kind of mixed, more urban character of the downtown gateway. For the downtown gateway, we've recommended a core area that is a specific, distinct downtown gateway area that has a unique mix and opportunities for mix of activities, and also a real gateway character that we've talked about. That will be buffered by some residential uses, and then on either end there is a transition zone, or a transition area, I should say, that creates a buffer between the residential and the core and the other areas of the corridor. Yeah. And then this is the scenario that we've come up with for the Farmington Avenue segment that we recommend. And I think what jumps out most about this is, again, we are concentrating the commercial and the big box plazas where they are, and creating a more distinct nodes of those, and recommending that there be a lot of transition area in between. And in particular, that there be a nice transition between the heavily commercial areas on either end, right here, and the real residential remaining single-family homes right in the stretch right there. So the transition areas are really an area that has is a bit more density and than you might find in the single-family residential areas, a bit more compact, a little more going on, but it also is not quite as suburban as the commercial areas. So it really creates a smooth transition and protects those residential areas from the character and the activity that's going on in the heavy commercial areas. This is the concept that we developed for the downtown gateway area. Just a quick review. What you can see is that it focuses on creating more of a walkable environment, more of a pedestrian-oriented environment, and also providing some green space, and then reconfiguring the roadways just a bit to really ease the traffic flow through that area. So we've brought buildings to the street. We've created pedestrian pathways, a lot of landscaping. And as you can notice, we also, the key change was to create a bend in this street so that it comes out onto Main Street or Route 6 at a T intersection, as opposed to the funny angle that it's now on.
Carol, Ms. Gold, I wanted to just interject. We had a meeting about a week and a half ago with the developer of the school next to the former school next to the credit union. And that project is moving forward. So, you know, the amount of apartments that'll be in that building, it looks like that project is going forward. Will bring some vibrancy to the downtown gateway. Just wanted to mention that.
Oh, terrific. That's good to know. So these are the overriding themes for the land use recommendations that we have in the plan. That is, to have mixed use in the right context, to create opportunities for a mix of uses in a variety of areas throughout the transition zones, in particular in the corridor, which might be a mix of residential over commercial, or as I said, might create an opportunity for more live-work units, people who have small businesses downstairs and live upstairs or behind the businesses in front. There's really a focusing on managing the character and the design of the corridor. So as we look at zoning regulations and changes that you might want to make to them, it's really about how do you get the development applications that come into you to offer the kind of landscaping and arrangement on the site and the size and character of the buildings that really fit in with what you envision for each one of the segments of the corridor. We also are looking for some flexibility for the future. So we have recommended, for example, that you make a distinction between minor and major developments. And this creates an opportunity to treat them a little bit differently and perhaps give a bit more flexibility to smaller developers who want to come in and redevelop a site for a small business as opposed to one of the major commercial size. We also talk quite a bit in the plan about right-sizing parking, making the parking really fit in with the fabric that it's of the area that it's in, particularly the downtown gateway area, trying to create some public parking, maybe partnerships between private businesses and the city for parking so that you really make the most out of the area that you set aside for parking and don't have an excess of parking that breaks up the fabric of the downtown gateway area in particular. And our primary tool that we've recommended be used for all of this is a wide variety of zoning adjustments. And so the table of recommendations has quite a bit of detail in it about the types of adjustments that you might want to make to zoning. So these are some of the key land use recommendations. And again, it calls out sort of the themes that I've been talking about. The first is to develop a commercial plaza redevelopment guide, and we do have some links in Appendix A to the report that gives you some examples of how that's been done in a variety of communities. And the primary thing that the redevelopment guide does is give developers a very clear picture, both in pictures and words, of what you would like to see when commercial plaza sites are redeveloped, and how you'd like to see them become more destinations where somebody can park once and spend a certain amount of time in that location and really visit a lot of businesses. We recommend that you supplement the requirements relative to adaptive reuse, as we expect much of the development to be a reuse of existing properties or residential properties where someone may want to convert it to something commercial. You really want to have a lot of detail in there about how they go about doing this and about what the character of it should be if you are going to allow that to happen. We also recommend to adjust the minimum parking requirements. They are relatively high relative to the types of uses that you have, and to add maximums so that some of the big box developers who like to have as much parking appear available as possible will be discouraged from providing too much parking and really create more space for development and less of it dedicated to parking. And we also suggest you address consolidation of non-residential parcels. As you get applications, particularly I think in the Farmington Avenue segment of the corridor for redevelopment, you may have a number of small parcels that somebody wants to consolidate and turn it into one master development. And you want to be sure that as they do that, that your standards for what you want the site to look like are built into that process. So that's really what that's about. As I noted, we recommend that you distinguish between major and minor developments. This is in particular to help small businesses thrive in the corridor and remain there. There should be site design guidance for each of those and to provide graphics to the extent that you can, to provide someone with a picture of what you have in mind. It's very helpful to developers to be able to envision what it is you're aiming for. And as I said, to explore options for municipal and private partnerships for parking as well as for economic development, but to try and really create a collaboration with the private development community as development happens in the corridor. One of the key recommendations is for creating this mixed-use transition zone, and you see it in various places in each one of the segments, and to apply it to all relevant areas of the corridor. This can be done as an overlay zone, or it can be done as a rezoning of the area that's there, and I think that's something to explore a bit further as you look into applying this recommendation. And as I said, to adopt site design standards guidance for both minor and major developments. Okay.
Thanks,
And again, what you see on the left is the guiding policy that each one of these relates to. So there is some repetition of some of the recommendations in each one of the sections because it is key to the what you're trying to achieve with each group of them.
And I think this is, Carol, that's a particularly, this goal, that's a particularly important guiding policy. Maintain and protect the existing housing patterns in well-established neighborhoods.
Yeah. Well, and I think the market forces suggest that there may be different types of housing that may be attracted to the corridors, so the regulations, again, should consider having some more flexibility to accommodate that without sacrificing the character of what you want to see out there. And enhance the aesthetics of Route 6 was another, I think, key concern that we heard throughout the study. The design guidelines that you come up with should be tailored specifically to address this issue. In particular, compliance with the existing signage. I think that you have fairly comprehensive signage regulations, but they still seem to have fallen short of achieving what you want in the Farmington Avenue segment of the corridor. So I think they need to be revisited. And there may be perhaps some signage out there that has kind of slipped beyond what the intention was when they were originally installed. So we've also suggested perhaps doing a field review of those and working with the property owners to try and come to some agreement about how to handle that. And finally, for the program of economic development, we strongly recommend public-private partnerships. And one of the ways that you can do that is to also look into the establishment of business improvement districts, which would be a voluntary association of people in a discrete geographic areas, and they agree to work with the city to try and improve the streetscape and the public spaces within that area, and then they would fund it with essentially a tax on themselves in order to pay for that. And to add some selective relief from the regulations for small businesses. This can be anything from, I think the regulations don't allow any wall art or murals. You might want to consider giving some relief to that for some small businesses if it's in a transition area where you're getting kind of an arts and crafts thing going on, and you might want to allow them to have a mural on the side of the building. So that's one of the ways. Or to give them some relief from the parking regulations. Make it easier for them to get their parking someplace other than right on the site where the business is located. And we suggested to develop some gateway signage for each one of the segments of the corridor as a marketing tool. And now I'm going to let Mike talk for a couple of minutes about kind of overview of the transportation recommendations.
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
Again, my name is Mike Morehouse, and I'm not Francisco Gomes. So Francisco asked me to, yes?
Spell your last name.
Morehouse, M-O-R-E-H-O-U-S-E.
And what company are you with?
Fitzgerald and Halliday.
Oh.
So Francisco was the chief planner for many of these improvements. So I don't know the details that Francisco knows, but I am familiar with the corridor in general. And just my credentials, I've been in the business for almost 25 years. I'm a professional engineer, working in transportation engineering and planning. Very familiar with corridors like Route 6, worked on many throughout the state. And they're always challenging, right? Because these are state routes that really provide kind of a regional mobility function. And particularly, from a design standard perspective, they've been designed for capacity and speed primarily. But, over time, as corridors develop, there becomes kind of a conflict between that regional mobility function and the local objectives that you have as a town and a city in terms of promoting economic growth and providing access to property and pedestrian and bicyclist safety. So you get to a point where these things are really at odds with one another. So they're very challenging. It's hard to kind of reverse a lot of the issues that you see sort of growing over time. So the kind of improvements, and I'll speak to them in very general ways, and then if you have any specific questions, I'll do my best to answer. But we really want to take a look at things that we can improve over time that will help sort of reverse some of the trends that we see in the corridor. Access management is always a chief primary tool that we can use on a corridor like this where you have a lot of driveways. You have sometimes multiple driveways on a particular parcel. Sometimes that's necessary, sometimes it's not. You need a full review to take a look at that. Also, at times, the driveways are very wide. I know especially in the Terryville section, I've seen a lot of just really open curb cuts. Now that facilitates really fast ingress and egress of a property, but it's also, you know, very, very challenging if you're a pedestrian walking on a sidewalk and, you know, you have vehicles just looking to get in and out of properties. They're not necessarily looking for pedestrians. So looking at how to tighten those up and reduce those over time. Connectivity, providing maybe access off of side streets or cross-property easements, other ways to facilitate movement between properties that doesn't necessarily involve getting on and off Route 6. Safety is always a chief concern. This is the #1 thing that we find in corridors like this all over the place, right? When you have a road that's designed to move a lot of vehicles and you know, anywhere between 10,000 and 24,000 vehicles on this road, depending on what part of the corridor you're at, and you introduce a lot of driveways, you have that conflict. So high crash rates. I think there was over 1,100 crashes in a 3-year period along the full extent of the corridor. And those tend to concentrate, particularly on the eastern end, I believe, of the corridor a little bit more, in the Farmington Avenue section, particularly at unsignalized and side streets and signalized intersections and driveways to some of the bigger box stores. So these are areas that we want to look at in particular. You know, there might be specific countermeasures that we can address some of the high crash rates in those areas. So that's a targeted improvement. And then, to the extent we can, bicycle and pedestrian enhancements, completing the sidewalk network, maybe making the sidewalk a little bit more comfortable, wider, more buffer area between the roads. So those are kind of the things we would look at on a corridor like this. And if you go to the next slide, there's just a summary of these things. I think I pretty much talked about them. But you know, really evaluate the role of the collectors and side streets with Route 6, addressing those intersections, making sure that they're safe, they're well marked, they have pedestrian crossings and all of that. Access management, it's something that takes time to implement, but getting a good plan in place so that as you know, reviews, properties turn over, you know, new site plans come to your commission, you can, you know, then hold them accountable to maybe make some changes in the way they provide access. Reducing the width is really, I think, a key one in my perspective. The sidewalk network, we know that the improvements of Route 6 that the state's contemplating for Farmington Avenue, there's an opportunity to provide better sidewalks in those areas. So we think, you know, continuing that dialogue with DOT is important. But also, you know, any new construction project, look to make that a condition of approval to provide public sidewalks. And certainly make the marked crosswalks much more pronounced and visible. I mean, that's going to be really key if you really want to promote, you know, walkability in the corridor. And also complete some of the gaps from the side streets to Route 6. If you want the communities and the neighborhoods off of Route 6 to access Route 6 by on foot, give them a sidewalk. So. Transit, you know, you've got a couple of bus lines on the corridor. No real opportunity right now for shelters, benches, anything really comfortable from a transit perspective. And if you want to encourage transit ridership and, again, provide opportunities for those users to have a, you know, kind of a better level of service, that's something you should identify in key locations. And then to the extent possible, bicycle accommodations. Very difficult, obviously, within your curb-to-curb width. You have, you know, inconsistent shoulder space and not a lot of room to expand, but there may be some opportunities for some off-road paths in the locations where bicyclists would particularly go, and then providing linkages to the neighborhoods and places off of the corridor. So I think that wraps up those recommendations, and if you don't have any questions, I'll pass it back to Carol.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Lisa, going to talk a little bit about the implementation plan. As I said, you have a standalone, short working document. And the reason we did this is because we do intend for it to be a working document, something that you can, as you go through and decide which elements of this you want to move forward at which points in time, you can keep track of it and also have it to mark up, provide new ones. And the plan itself was intended to be adopted as an amendment to the Plan of Conservation and Development. And so it will be, in some senses, static once you do that. And by having a separate standalone implementation plan, you can continue to work with it and refine it as you go along without having to worry about that status as an amendment to the plan. So we have 3 initiatives in the plan, which I'll talk about a little bit in a moment. we make a recommendation for a lead champion for each one of these plans. And this doesn't necessarily mean that the lead champion will do all of the work, but that they will orchestrate the work, so that if the zoning commission is going to be primarily responsible for the zoning amendments, they would also come to you for your advice and input. They would talk to members from the private business community as they develop amendments to see how well they might be received. So it's really to, as I said, orchestrate and to oversee the implementation of a group of recommendations rather than to try and do them all themselves. We provided some broad timelines for the implementation plan, and these are the ones that you'll see at the top of each one of the pages on the implementation program. Short-term are things that might be completed within the next 1 to 3 years, the things that can be done relatively easily and often with very low cost, comparatively speaking. The medium-term the medium-term timeline would be within the next 4 to 7 years, and each of these are a bit progressive. They're ones that might take a bit longer to pull together the elements of it, and also might have some more costs associated with it. And then there are things that are long-term that you would attempt to accomplish within the next 10 years. So that not over the life of the plan necessarily, but certainly to see implementation happen. And this might be things that would require major capital expenditure. And then there are things that would be ongoing. So it could start within the next year and continue beyond as necessary. And some of the zoning amendments, I think, might fall into that category. And then you'll see we have a monitoring tool. And I'll talk a little bit about the 3 initiatives, and then we'll show you the monitoring tool. So the 3 initiatives are organized by the type of action, broad category of action that would fall within each initiative. So there's a zoning initiative, which would be mostly amendments, but the recommendations, also the action items, are for adjustments to the development processes. There's one we're calling development collaboration, and this really falls more on the economic development and marketing side of things, and forming partnerships between the City of Bristol and the private sector for guiding the development of the corridor over time. And then there's the transportation-related recommendations. There are things that the city might take responsibility for, things that they would do in collaboration with ConnDOT, and then things that are going to require some further analysis and study. And this may be some of the side streets that Mike mentioned, that you might want to take a closer look at how the intersections are functioning on these minor collector or local roads with Route 6. Yeah. So this is what the monitoring tool looks like, and what it's intended is for each of the champions to start by sitting down with this tool and looking through these and talking about how much time do we want to take to accomplish it? Do we want to set ourselves some targets for completing them? And then on the right-hand column is an opportunity to update it. So each time that the champion or the champions committee or group meets, they can go through this status item and update it and change it. And adjust perhaps even how they're going to go about doing the recommendations, what exactly the actions are that they're going to take. So there's one of these for each one of the initiatives in this packet, and it's something that you can reproduce and reuse over and over again. So that's it for our overview of what's in the plan and the implementation program. The next step is for you to hopefully approve the plan this evening for forwarding to a public hearing. We will work on some adjustments to the plan over the summer months as needed. And then to have the public hearing as an amendment to the Plan of Conservation and Development in the fall, and then to start implementation. So now if there's any questions or comments.
Good job. Very good job.
Mr. Chairman, if no commission members have any questions, I do have a couple questions. Maybe if not to put you on the spot, just to kind of go through the implementation plan with particular focus on the short-term time frame page. So it's the outline of short-term and long-term really starts on page 7 of the implementation plan. You kind of go through maybe some of the short terms, item by item. And maybe just elaborate on Either that or I can read it to you. Yeah. We require public construction as a condition of site, development permits. So our city ordinance currently requires sidewalks as part of a, site plan approval, unless it's actually waived by city council. And then just going through on the Terryville Avenue, segment, develop a conductivity plan for bicycle and pedestrians. I guess I just say this really just for the commission's benefit. We recently did do a site assessment. It was actually funded through a grant from the state with the DOT, not in this corridor, not on Route 6. We had submitted a grant for the corridor really between Rockwell Park and Memorial Boulevard all the way down to Down Street. So we looked at the corridor between Rockwell Park, Brackett Park, Memorial Boulevard, really the downtown section. Once again, that's not in this corridor, but I would say that as recently as even today, there is potentially another funding opportunity for another type of assessment. So one of the things that the engineering in conjunction with the land use department will do, which quite frankly, there's potentially an opportunity to request funding for a safety assessment within this corridor. I would say that as important as this corridor is, we also have to weigh potentially other options, whether we continue and expand the corridor that has already been studied. But that is something that staff will be evaluating and submitting a grant for. Once again,
So since we don't always know what staff is working on, could we get some type of report on those types of things?
Specifically, a report
Or
was
report afterwards?
Yeah, a report was generated for the one that was funded for the grant. Once again, Rockwell Park, Brackett Park, Memorial Boulevard, and we can close that in the next packet for the commission's benefit.
That'd be great. That's an important corridor for us too, with West End.
And then the next short-term item, just once again, just kind of reading down, is encourage access management for non-commercial parcels as part of the building permit process. And you get that. I guess the one I did have a question on is provide shared road, Charles, and pavement markings on Race Street. Can you just elaborate on what do you mean by that? Provide some additional detail.
Let's see where you are.
Page 8.
Provide shared road, Sherrill pavement markings on Race Street.
Yeah, I think that's an opportunity, if I'm remembering correctly where this is. It's an opportunity to create a path off of Route 6 that would kind of come through the neighborhood that would provide an area for bicyclists to get from the Terryville Avenue or other areas of the downtown gateway through to the downtown without having to come through that North Main Street intersection. So it is shown on one of the graphics, I think, in the plan. I was going to see which, do you know which page we're at, Bob? But it's a Sherrill is a roadway marking. Maybe I'll like to find it.
Yeah, I mean,
better.
it's a shared lane marking. It's not like a specific bicycle lane that's 5 feet on the side of the road. It's meant to go on roads with lower volume traffic, slower speed traffic, to allow cyclists to put themselves in a position and allow motorists to know that bicyclists are welcome on the road. It gives a level of comfort to both the rider and the driver. But it's kind of an interim bicycling solution. It's not certainly the ideal that you would want if you really want to promote cycling, but it helps.
And then the next one down, which is new curb ramps at crosswalks on the north side of Route 6 at North Main Street.
Yeah, and I think this is a spot where we observed out in the, looking out in the field that there is the ramp is missing, that there should be, I think, curb ramps on both sides of the road, if that's what I recall, at the rail overpass, and to try to create more a safer pedestrian crossing environment in that area, because it's difficult to see with the rail overpass as you're walking to see pedestrians or for pedestrians to see. So I
Well,
think that that's what that
Yeah,
was.
I know that the DOT has been looking at all of their, well, as many as they can, their intersections around the state just for ADA accessibility. That's usually what the curb ramp is about, making sure that the push button's in the right location, it works, make sure there's a curb ramp, a tactile strip, they come in at the right angles. So I don't know if the department's been doing this in Bristol. I know they've been doing it in a lot of other towns. We were involved a couple of years ago in doing that work. But that's certainly something that the DOT should take a look at. They're really trying to bring everything up to PRO-AG standard and make sure that it's all ADA accessible.
I guess I'd say this just really for the commission's benefit, that in particular at the intersection, because this even came out at the working groups meeting, and once again just to provide a little bit of historical context and a little background, as part of the city streetscape project on North Main Street, which certainly terminates at Route 6, one of the items that was in the original design was actually a stamped crosswalks across Route 6. Now, at this point, we're going back, several years, and in all fairness to the DOT, I think even the DOT, both the culture and even some of their details have changed, because at that point, you have to understand that in order to work on a state roadway, we do need DOT approval. The specific improvement, a specific permit is an encroachment permit. At the time that we did the streetscape project, we could not get an encroachment permit to do that work, which is why that we literally took it out of the project. So it was funded, it was part of the project. We didn't provide colored crosswalks across Route 6 at that intersection, really because we couldn't get DOT. Even the one on North Main Street, if you notice, it's set back a little bit because I had to move it back into the city right away. I had to stay out of the state right away. Once again, that project was performed now some years ago, and I don't know whether we could get specifically what we wanted to approve today, but I do know that certainly the DOT is more open to that type. In general, I would say that the DOT really looks to the local municipalities for sidewalks. Certainly the state funds for the DOT really center on roadway pavement. Now the city, through the capital improvement program, even what the commission approved as part of our council referral today, as you recall, there's 10 or 12 projects. You have to understand that Public Works literally probably has 100 projects, and they're divided into several categories. Some of them are local roads. There's 234 miles of local roads. We have a whole category for proposed sidewalk projects, a category for bridges, outside of waste division. We even have a category for land use for funding like this. And each year, the approval process for the capital improvement program is literally a competition between all those various projects. Certainly from the Public Works perspective, we do have a hierarchy. There's regulatory requirements that we just have to meet, and along with safety. But from the Public Works Department, right from our director, Walter Selka, we do see that sidewalks are an integral part of the transportation system, and we have initiated and installed sidewalks of the year, including we even had some funded on Route 6 in the area of Walmart, ultimately because as I indicated that sidewalks are required as a condition of the city ordinance, that property ultimately got developed before we had an opportunity to go through the funding process. So the sidewalks ended up being built through the private development process, which is quite frankly the way we want it.
I have one question, Rick, more of a comment to that. When all these sidewalk improvements are done, is the DOT checking on these crosswalks at the same time? Just happens that all the way up Route 6 is a very unsafe, and it has been for years as far as crosswalks. My wife, when she was working at 16, so we're going 20 plus years, there's never been at the Brook Street mixture. There's still, to this day, there's no crosswalk. You go to Stafford Ave, Farmington Ave, I found out that that one doesn't work. So before we're worried about sidewalk safety, shouldn't we be worried about currently what's there?
If I understood you correctly, you just, talked about a couple of things. So the DOT, I can't speak, for the DOT. Clearly, we communicate, with the DOT, to a certain extent. I could speak, on local roads with respect to pavement markings. If you notice, we do try to keep pavement markings, up. If you notice, it's particularly noticeable, in my opinion, on like West Street, where we intersect the streets, which are local roads. You'll notice that the crosswalks are typically painted, maybe not so much, on the DOT projects. There's also certainly there's a number of signalized, intersections. 26 of them are owned by the city. Some of them are actually even on state highways, are owned, by the city, and when we do maintain, those, as recently as a project that we're moving forward with from a state grant for video detection, which ultimately, and we also have a project funded in order to reevaluate all the timing in our traffic signals and to look at items, such as to make sure that they're operating efficiently.
Is there a way to get me that list of the crosswalks that are municipal owned, like you're saying?
Well, you said crosswalks. You started saying. I would just.
The lights.
So the lights are easy. There's 24, 20,
right.
6 of them, and we can provide that.
Is there? Yes. So that's.
So if you contact me, tomorrow, or send me an email, I can you can provide that list.
Okay. I'm just curious. Like you're saying, West Street. That's also a state highway. So that's Route 69.
Correct.
So I'm just curious, which one is municipal trouble and which one is DOT, state. So I prefer to see some, just to see which ones are under our control and which ones are under the state. So.
The ones that are owned by the city, on state highways, even though we own them, meaning that we're financially responsible to maintain them, control will be an overstatement, because in order to do something on it, we still need a state.
Sure. Okay. Lack of a better word. So.
Mr. Chairman, I just wanted to chime in. And, if I could just offer an anecdotal comment, it's I think it's unique in the state of Connecticut that the land use office and land use is in the Public Works Department, and it exposes my office to a lot of things that we would not be exposed to. And certainly welcome Mr. Ragazinski's comments this evening, and he brings a whole new perspective to the study, I think. Wanted to just mention that something that Ms. Gould touched on, a few things that she touched on, is the adaptive reuse of the corridor. And that's where change is going to happen. We're not going to do this all at once. It's going to be adaptively reused, and obviously now I'm focusing more on land use. We want to enhance what's there, and a lot of it is driven by market forces. I get folks that come in the office all the time that are interested in purchasing stores or plazas. We're working with a couple of folks right now, a couple of engineers, and I just want this commission to know, and I've said this before, that this plan, even if there isn't a regulation implemented in the next 6 months by the Zoning Commission, which would happen through the Zoning Commission, that this plan has helped inform me in my daily office tasks, and when I'm meeting with folks, I'm pulling out the plan and I'm making references to the plan, and even though, again, it hasn't been adopted, at least developers and those looking to either adaptively reuse parcels or for new developments, it's informing their decisions and our thoughts. So I just want you to be aware of that. Access management is going to be something that we're going to focus on, I think, pretty quickly with respect to zoning. It's already in the regulations. It's on Route 72. It's been used pretty well on Route 72 so far. And again, it's just getting folks who are developing sites to stop and think for a second about how they're going to access the site and how they might be able to do that better. There's a scoring system that's already in the regulations that would allow them to gain points when they're getting in front of the Zoning Commission to have a site plan approved. One of the other things I think that the Route 6 corridor lends itself to is, again, grouping driveways, having neighbors, commercial neighbors talk to each other and trying to limit the amount of curb cuts. So again, this is all stuff that we've gone over before, and I just wanted to reiterate that. Lastly, this evening, I received a few comments from staff. One comment was from Dawn Ledger, who was our grants administrator with the BDA, and she had some comments about signs, and she thought the plan was good to call out some of the issues with the corridor, especially with signage. And then we had some comments from Lieutenant Kozarin, who is with the traffic department of the city. Lieutenant Kozarin called out some issues. So as staff, and there will be other staff comments that will be coming, as those comments come forward, we're going to look at the plan with the chair and the vice chair, and then bring something forward. Obviously, there won't be any drastic changes to the plan moving forward, but we will be making some tweaks along the way as the summer progresses, and then get this in front of you for a public hearing in the fall.
Mr. Chair, can I touch on something? That I know. Sooner or later, I promise I'll be quiet soon. If you had a developer coming into your office, Bob, saying they wish to develop on Route 6, and you looked at them and told them, well, you can only have X amount of spaces on that property, do you think they're going to turn and walk out of your office? Or I know I brought up this last, but that is just horrible to me when you're trying to promote business in the town, yet telling them you can only have 10 spots at your place, or not, you can't park on your property at all.
Well, first of all, right now, Commissioner Howe, that is not in the regulations.
Right.
The regulations govern right now. But I think what we're trying to do is we're trying to creatively look at ways to have folks look at parking from not a maximum perspective, from a minimum perspective. And I'm just throwing out a big box store just because it's a good example, does a big box store need all the parking for the day after Thanksgiving 365 days of the year? Probably not. Could they get together with a neighbor, and we already have some shared parking regulations in the regulations, and look at cooperatively sharing that parking with their neighbors? So you might be looking at it from a negative business perspective, and I look at it from a positive business perspective, is that we get business neighbors to talk to each other, to share that parking, rather than just saying, okay, you're allowed, you have to provide a minimum, but there's no maximum at all. So I think it does a disservice to the city if we just allow parking lot after parking lot to be developed and not have some kind of guidelines. So
I'm just afraid that they walk in there and you say, well, you have a minimum amount of parking for your business, but then you're also going to have a maximum, because we're already in our zoning regulations say you can only have minimum.
No, you have to have.
You have to have a certain minimum. Now to turn that and add this to our plan and conservation development, now you have to have so many, but you can't have this many.
But I think that most businesses are smart enough to know that to pave all, say I could fit 300 parking spots on the property, big box, small box, I don't really care. And, why would I want to pay for all of that if I know I'm not going to get that kind of traffic? They're smart business people out there. I don't think they're going to really go away. If they want to do business, they'll figure it out.
Bob's not going to let them go away.
Another way that they might look at this also is that if I don't have to have this excessive number of spaces, it gives me more building space. It gives me more room for development. So I have more actual commercial floor space as opposed to dedicating that space to parking. Especially if it's in the downtown gateway and they say, well, there's a public parking lot across the street. So some of my patrons are going to park in that public parking lot and walk across the street and spend time in my business, and I'm not paying for those parking spaces.
If the crosswalk is working.
Yes, exactly.
So there's another issue.
Yeah.
I just think we're dictating too much of them, maximum, minimum, I don't know.
Well, I think we have to start somewhere, and it's a conversation, and I can assure you my office balances the needs of the community along with the development needs. I'd like to think I do a pretty good job of that. And we also want to employ aesthetics. So a parking lot just doesn't have to be a barren piece of tar. Let's have some islands and some trees, and let's try to make it a little prettier to look at when folks are driving by. So again, if this does become part of the plan of conservation and development, It is not a zoning regulation. The zoning regulation would be a separate process with a public hearing and would be debated with folks weighing in during the public hearing process. So just because it gets in the plan is advisory, and it's a good place to start, and we would move on from there. So these are going to be gradual changes, Commissioner Howler. It's not going to be anything drastic right away. And as Ms. Gould said, I think the plan and the business owners out there are seeing this in other towns and cities throughout the United States, and they're willing, I think, to be flexible and not just walk away. They're not going to walk away from 22 or 24,000 cars a day. The business owners see that, and they see that there's a profit there. I can't disclose any names of corporations right now, but I'm working with one corporation right now, just on a preliminary basis, and they want a particular site, and I know why they want that site is because there's 24,000 cars a day going by the site. So if we require maybe a little more landscaping, they're not going to walk away. They see a profit there. So I look at it as a balance. We're trying to get something more for the city, but also be able to provide development for opportunities for these folks when they come along. So it's a balance.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, I had heard in the past certain business owners complain how many parking spaces they had to create in order to be there. So there are also particularly how many handicap parking spaces in comparison to how often they are used. So those are
state
things we
building
need.
code.
But that's state building. Yes.
But thank you for your comments. I appreciate it.
I got tons, but we'll be here till 11, so I'll leave it all alone.
Any other comments from the commission or staff? Okay, at this time...
So we go on to our study final draft report.
Motion would be in order.
Make the following motion to accept the May 31st, 2017 City of Bristol Route 6 Corridor Plan Final Draft Report.
Second.
As written,
Sorry.
as written from the consultant Fitzgerald Halliday, and direct staff and to continue to prepare and assimilate comments into City of Bristol Final Route 6 Corridor Plan for final review and potential amendment to the 2015 Bristol Plan of Conservation and Development. The public hearing date for the potential amendment to the 2015 Bristol Plan of Conservation and Development will be determined by the Planning Commission later this year, period.
Second.
Motion was made and seconded. Any further comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Next item is to accept the acceptance of the May 31st, 2017 Route 6 Corridor Study Final Implementation Program.
Okay, motion will be in order on that.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make the following motion to accept the May 31st, 2017 City of Bristol Route 6 Corridor Study Implementation Program as written from the consultants Fitzgerald and Halliday.
Second.
Motion is made and second. Any further discussion? If none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Next.
Next order of business is our audience of citizen. I'm not going to read the whole thing again. 15 minutes total, 3 minutes per citizen. Comments are limited to agenda items other than development applications.
Anyone wishing to speak? Okay. Just go on up here and state your name and address for the record, please.
Good evening. My name is Judy Tallman. I live at 415 Farmington Avenue, which is dead center in the middle of the Farmington Avenue Corridor Center. And it's also probably the last heavily residential area. And we've been there since 1984. Grew up from 1965 on Moody Street, so this is the neighborhood. And I'm thrilled. I really appreciate the depth and thoughtfulness that went into the plan. You guys did a good job. I don't agree with it all, but it's about time somebody finally looked at it. And my main couple of concerns, one of the limits on parking, but I guess that can go either way, depending on who the big box developer is. Certainly if you go by any of the grocery stores, tomorrow's the 1st of June. Good luck trying to get a parking place at about 6 o'clock maybe. Everybody's out there. I'm happy that it seems like you don't want to add to commercial zoning in the corridor, reuse, readapt. That's what we've been talking about since these meetings started over a year ago. Accidents, this is a continuing thing. I work in Hartford every day. Drive through Farmington Avenue. That's a fun strip right now, and I guess it's going to be till November 2018. Apparently, even though it's been almost almost 2 months, people still can't figure out coming eastbound from westbound from Hartford that 2 lanes become one very suddenly. Lot of bad lives and language out of that thing every afternoon. Traffic has been a continual problem since 1965 when I first moved in the neighborhood. It's never really been addressed, and I hope with development we start to talk about that. Bristol has a lot of really good zoning laws on the board. I'd like to see us enforce them with a sign, through the signing, such as Mr. Flanagan alluded to. We need to take care of ourselves. And finally, my big concern living where I live is the transitional mixed-use areas. I've got right up from, there's Yankee Harley, there's KFC, there's 2 properties that are for sale, brokered by a realtor who is famous for trying to put commercial development on the avenue. Perfect spot for a TMU. Scares the heck out of me, because once you start that, there's no going back. And it's not just those of us who live on Farmington Avenue, the side streets, Mercier, Hoover, even Jerome. You ruin people's quality of lives. And that's my big thing. I understand the concept, the thought behind a TMU, but I really think it's a bad idea. And just had a curious question. Who does sidewalk maintenance on 6? You're talking about adding sidewalks, it's great. Who's supposed to maintain them?
According to the city ordinance, residential property owners are responsible for the sidewalks along the property frontage.
Okay, so if I have a hole developed, my sidewalk in front of my house collapses, even though I don't own that property, I have to maintain it?
Correct.
Interesting. Thank you. I don't think I used my 3 minutes.
You did good. Thank you.
Easy night for you folks. My name is Lawrence Tallman. I live at 415 Farmington Avenue. My wife just spoke. I do realize that this planning has been forever. There wasn't a planning plan for Bristol in place, and it needed to be done. And so far, it's proceeding quite well. But there are certain things that I have addressed in the past. The TMU zone, where you blanketly zone for residential or commercial, is an absolute big mistake. It is not something, it's almost forcing something. I can buy the house next door and turn it commercial. That's not fair to the people who live there without individual zoning as we have now. So that procedure in place now functions. It has functioned since we've been here, and it still works. So I don't think we need to change that. And you folks are only going to suggest that, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, correct? Is that, or are you going to accept it to be law?
No, we're going to review it.
Right, but
It's not going to be law until we approve it.
all right, but when you approve it, you can approve to dual zone property. Is that what is? I just want to be clear.
That's a zoning commission process.
Okay, yeah, but you will suggest to them, and then it will be up to them to make that decision.
But there would be an application that would come before the commission, there would be a public hearing,
So
just like there were with the...
Just like with any
Zone changes.
It's very important that that doesn't get slipped through, because why limit it to that? Let's change it. Let's make it something else. The way the system works now, it works. Bristol has come a long way, and it does pretty well on its own. Naturally, the times change. The demands are met somehow. The only thing that I see being on Route 6, especially in that Farmington Avenue corridor, in order to make this plan work on any of this part of Route 6, you gotta address the issues of Route 6 first. What is wrong with Route 6? The number of cars. That's a good thing for business. But when they go 60 and 80 miles an hour, how do you get somebody to cross the street? How do you get a bicycle to go down the street safely? How do you make a turn into that narrow curb cut? It's impossible. So until those things are addressed, and I'm finally at the end of my rope where I want to find out, I know the city doesn't enforce the rules on Route 6, the law, and the state doesn't, and somehow they argue about each other, and there's a lot of money to be made in issuing tickets. And if they slowed people down, it would be safer, it would be quieter, it would be a wonderful place to put a business. It would be a wonderful place to have a narrow curb cut. The way it is now, until we address that issue, it's probably not going to be easy to fix. But once it is fixed, then you could drive by and look at the beautiful aesthetics. You could see the people riding on the bikes, and everybody lives happily ever after. And that's about all I have to say about that.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, sir, just as a follow-up to the specific question associated with sidewalks, I would say that city does have a program to cover some of the costs for sidewalk replacements. It's for residential properties. There's a cost sharing. The city would pay 50%, and then it goes down depending on how many residential units there are on the property. So we do have a program for cost sharing. I would say that currently working off of a list. So if you were interested, you can contact the engineering department.
I believe my wife alluded to the water department last year put a new shut-off. Ours hadn't been changed since 1930. So they put a new shut-off, and they put blacktop on the top, and it all collapsed. And we weren't sure if we were going to have to take care of that or not, but they finally came a week ago and put some concrete on it, so now it's not unsafe. But thank you for that, and now we know legally how it works.
It's one of those things you're kind of afraid to complain about in case it costs you money.
I just want to comment, it's nothing to do, but the comment you made about, speeding, and again, this has nothing to do with what we're talking about, other than the fact that I want to make a comment. My mother-in-law lives in Plainville, and they had a street where everybody was cutting through to avoid, the main road, and they put speed bumps on the roads. So everybody had to slow down.
Yeah.
And that wasn't a major thoroughfare; it was just a regular cut through.
It was probably the only option they had.
Right, but they did it.
But somebody needs to do something.
Right.
Otherwise, this plan can't really, it can't come to fruition properly.
I hear you.
That's the big thing. And the noise. The noise pollution is another whole thing. It's bad for people's health. It's bad for the environment. And the noise. When you take a motorcycle going 70 miles an hour up the avenue with no exhaust, no mufflers, and trucks, you just slow them down. Now, I look at it this way. They need to put two things in place. And you get two infractions going up that hill. You put a camera out there with a radar gun. The second infraction, they come and take your license. That's it. See, it doesn't cost anything, and they might take in some money.
That's right.
Pay for all
I'd
this.
lose my license. Come on.
Hey.
Oh, you're the one.
One of them.
Anyone else like to make a comment?
Yeah?
No.
Motion to adjourn.
Wait, no.
Oh, I'm sorry, I
Right.
didn't, sorry.
It's all right. I know nobody wants to hear from me.
Well, you got 3 minutes.
3 minutes.
All right.
And I'm trying to...
Name and address for the record.
Does that come off to 3 minutes?
No.
Sean Ruest, 53 Lancaster Road.
Okay.
I don't mean to be pessimistic about the study, but one word comes to mind when I read it: strode. Are you familiar with the term strode? If you're not, strode is street road hybrid, and it's described as being a very dangerous environment. It actually says ridiculously dangerous to mix high-speed highway geometric design with pedestrians, bikers, and turning traffic. They are enormously expensive to build and ultimately financially unproductive. And I think for the most part, applying a TMU zone over most parts of the corridor is just going to create a dangerous situation. I spoke to some people over near Stafford Avenue that were trying to cross the road. The traffic signals don't work. They don't do anything. One gentleman I spoke to, his father lost his life trying to cross over there. It's been like that for over 20 years. And so I can't believe we're talking about putting bicycles along Route 6. You know, what is it? Up to 24,000 vehicles in a day. A shared bike lane, which should just be painting to give bicyclists a false sense of comfort on the road. I think you're encouraging people to take risky behavior if you do that kind of thing on Route 6. If you want to have bicycle circulation in the vicinity of Route 6, I think the city of Bristol should be thinking about like Louisiana Avenue, where it goes right by a school, and you can continue up past Page Park, and that follows the corridor. It's a side street, and but it takes the cars off, takes the pedestrians, I should say the bicyclists, out of the mix with the high-speed moving vehicles. Widening the road over there, it's just going to make cars go faster, and it's making it more dangerous. One thing I noticed in the corridor plan, I don't know if I went over my 3 minutes, but are you guys tired? You need to get to bed? I'll go home. There's a photo here from, I guess, Google Maps, and it shows Lee Poe, and it says sidewalk to nowhere. I'm pretty sure that sidewalk got finished, but I could be wrong. Isn't that sidewalk complete now? It goes now from Stafford Avenue all the way to ShopRite Plaza? So I'm not sure if that...
I think so. I'm pretty sure.
So I'm not sure that belongs in here, or... I don't
Yes,
know.
you're right, but initially it was there, I guess.
But there's so many things, and I don't want to spend all your time on it. I don't understand why you would want to increase any density on Route 6 unless you could get the vehicles out of the way. The only way I could perceive using these planning principles on Route 6, let's say if Walmart grocery was a parking garage, so the people traveling up Route 6 could turn off of Route 6, and then you already have your commercial area over there, everything from Harvest Bakery over into that plaza that would accomplish. I think these are the things that you're trying to accomplish. You're trying to, with the plan of development, get vehicles off the road and get people interested in using public transportation with things like parking maximums, which I don't think that principle is working all too well over here on Federal Hill. There was a zoning change application that just came through that was denied because it would be spot zoning. A lot of residents from this neighborhood over here went to complain because the residential units that were being built near the bus stop over here, the newer ones were being built with higher density without having enough parking. So people have spillover parking on the streets, people are parking on the sidewalks, people are parking in other people's parking lots. If you apply parking maximums to sections of Route 6 where you have mixed use, which is going to have residential, so if you're looking to apply the parking maximums to smaller units, not just large shopping plazas, where are the guests of those people going to park? Is the city planning on buying parcels of land and creating parking lots along Route 6? Because otherwise, are they going to be parking on side streets behind and walking around? Because if we have a problem here, I don't anticipate that we're not going to have a problem somewhere else. And the other thing, it just blows my mind. I'm sorry.
Time's up.
Just one more thing. You have 24,000 cars going down a corridor, and you're talking about parking maximums. You have many conflicts in this aspect, I think. All right. Sorry I talked so much.
May I remind the public that you can also submit your comments in writing?
I just put them in the newspaper. If you don't want to hear
And not
it
try to
here.
get it all in 3 minutes.
I put it in my blog. I'll put it in the newspaper. You guys don't want to hear it?
You should submit it to us so we can see it and not have to...
You'll see it.
Anyway, motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries.